Duolingo and Monday.com.
That's true.
And they have, not in terms of business economics, they definitely have different competitive advantages. I'd say the switching cost on Monday.com are extremely high. Duolingo's advantage is less around switching cost and more from improving its app through proprietary data. So they're now making this shift from, let's say you go on Duolingo. Before, it was like you do lesson 1, you do lesson 2, you do lesson 3, fixed decision tree. Now, they're moving towards using that data to constantly retrain the AI to work out what's retaining people on the app the longest, what's helping people learn, what is converting people to paid subscribers. And they have hundreds of millions of data points. And their CEO, Louis Van Aan, was previously, he founded Recapture, when you tick a box and select the image with fire hydrants, type in this text. That fundamentally, without going into it too much, is machine learning. So this is somebody with a background in machine learning who founded Recapture in, I believe, the year 2007 and sold it to Alphabet in 2009. He's got a PhD in computer science, and his thesis was about human computation systems. So the thesis with Duolingo, what happened was, similar to Monday, Q4 bookings growth forecasted to be very low. I say very low. The growth forecasted bookings was still about 22%. So, but yeah.
It's mental, isn't it, when you say those growth rates and you go, it's a little bit low, and then you come out with like 20-something%. You're like,
It's nuts. But, Duolingo, they grew 40% revenue last year, and they're still forecasted to do about 37% in revenue this year. It's just bookings leads revenue growth for Duolingo. However, similar to Monday.com, it's all about prioritizing the long-term value of those users that they've got, maximize retention, but grow the daily active users as well. Because that's the engine. You get users first and then you monetize them. So Duolingo, they get users first. Maybe they're on a free model and they see some adverts. Maybe they're on freemium, so sometimes they pay to unlock the next level, and then they move towards subscription. And now they have 2-tier subscription as well. So they have Duolingo Max, which is like the next level. But that's basically the whole idea with Duolingo, is you've got a company now where the education industry is very archaic. And, you know this because you mentioned that you're in education, right? And there's a big disconnect between 21st century, the skills we're utilizing in the workplace, and the way that we're taught in conventional schools. And Duolingo is helping to become an aid in that education system. So they have languages, they have maths, they now have music, and they also have chess, which is an interesting choice. But the whole point is that in a conventional education system, the way it works, someone writes a syllabus, someone writes a textbook, they kind of guess what the children need to learn. And I'm interested for your thoughts on this, because as I said, I know that you work in the industry, and you're all test standardized. The problem is that we all learn at different rates. We all have different methods of learning, and we have different strengths and weaknesses. And Duolingo has potential, again, like hymns, the vast majority of it is not built yet, but they have potential to use the data that they're collecting on their app to continuously improve learning outcomes for people and scale into, as I said, a personalized education solution. And then the other part of it is just financial, that they are now trading at 23 times forward price to free cash flow. They're trading quite expensive on price to revenue, but they don't need to do sales and marketing very much anymore. The app is universally known. The Duolingo owl, the notification sounds, so they only spend 13% of their revenue on sales and marketing. So they have very high free cash flow margins. And that's the whole idea, is that I think that they are the company that's best positioned for education in the era of AI, growing very fast. They've already raised a whole load of money to build out the back end. They got the free cash flow, and then it becomes a compounding machine. And you think about the size of that education market, and Duolingo are a $10 billion company. So that's the basis of the thesis. Let me know if you've got any questions, and I'm happy to go into more detail on any specific areas of that.
Yeah, I mean, it does look interesting because, like we were just saying there, that the growth rates still look pretty good. To say the concern about growth rates, they still look pretty good at the moment. My only, I really want to look at this one, but I've just not been able to get any time to go into a bit of a deep dive with it at all yet. But I'd really like to have a deep dive into this one. My major concern with it, without having to do any research, so I might sound absolutely stupid, is just the competition aspect. I just don't know how easy this is to disrupt, and if a competitor could come in and disrupt it, how, what's the moat, how sticky it is for people to stay into the platform. But what I've heard from it, one of the big steps in the right direction is that people are actually starting to take the language learning awards, or I don't know what the correct term for this is, a little bit more serious, where they're actually getting recognized a little bit. And I'm sure I've heard somewhere that they are pushing to have what, like I said, I'm very low on the research on it, but the rewards for what you learn on there, as say your certificate or what have you, can get recognized when you're going into like further aspects of like education potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is potentially a major step forward. If you go from this spare time that this thing you do in your spare time can actually then improve your CV substantially, where it could help you access. I think there's some parts that you probably know this, is supported and recognized by like universities or something like that. But the
Absolutely.
more that could get built up, that could be a really, a sticky thing for them, where, that could be a major growth driver for them ultimately. The only thing I've had a quick look when you were talking there, the balance sheet looks very good. Great balance sheet there, and they look like they make pretty decent levels of profitability. No debt on there. I'm surprised with the drop that they've been on. We had the same conversation with Monday.com when we last talked about it. They've not been buying any shares back at the moment, which I'm really surprised by with the drop that they've been on. But yeah, there's a couple of points there, Henry. I don't know if there's any that you want to come back with.
So they do break down their revenue. It's a very good point, actually, and I should have mentioned this. They do break down their revenue by app revenue, and then they have the Duolingo English test. And you're right, it's very accredited. I remember I looked at this back in 2023. I'd actually invested in Duolingo at one point in 2023. And I found a whole load of universities in the UK, some very reputable ones. I remember that University of Bristol was on the list, for example. A lot of very reputable unis. I think one of the London unis, Imperial or UCL, was on the list as the Duolingo English test is an acceptable barometer to measure your English competency when applying for universities in a language. So the course is structured in a language that's not your mother tongue or not your native language. And that was incredibly interesting to see, because you're right. As Duolingo, I don't know if it's their main focus right now, because I think the app is almost got a bit more playful, if you see what I'm saying. So Duolingo English test, they don't mention it as much, and it's not growing astronomically fast compared to the actual app revenue. However, that's a huge vertical for them in the future. You're absolutely right. I have a feeling that in the near term, they're going to concentrate on continuing to improve this app, probably for the younger generation, or what I mean, like children. But then again, there's official accreditations that could come from that. And they've now also, for example, added a quantitative score that you get for certain languages. So you can say, I'm a 25 in French, I'm a 7 in Russian. So you actually kind of have a bit of an accreditation example coming in there. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting company. They certainly do have the option to buy back a lot of shares, and maybe that's something that they're going to consider doing more of now the shares are at a very big low. I don't know if they'll go down that route, or if they'll go down the right, let's up our capex and reinvest in AI. There was a chart that came out a couple of days ago, allegedly leaked from ChatGPT. I don't know if you saw it, and it was about how many tokens companies were using, and Duolingo was one of the top companies in terms of utilizing ChatGPT tokens, so they spent the most. So
Right.
they're really utilizing AI at the same time.
Yeah, I think if they're able to, I say, get more I think if they can get a little bit more tied into the education system, because I don't think it's on. Well, I know it's not. It's not on the UK school curriculum at the moment. Like just things like that getting tied in there, that would be, I think, a really good moat driver for them. And then you think about all the faces that would be in front of because people are using it a regular day, and then they'll take that home with them. That could be something that they really expand on if they're able to get those sort of ties. I don't know. Like I
Absolutely.
said, I don't know where if that's something that they're pushing for or if they're it's something they're keen on. But
Hmm. I think that that's going to be way down the line. It is ultimately, I think, where they're going. But you're right. I think that it'll be very slow to get it into the mainstream education sector in terms of actually being in schools. However, I'm not too concerned about that because they're obviously a consumer company right now. So, they've got that existing revenue driver. If they were trying to build this out for the public sector first, I would have a lot of concern. I think more what's going to happen, for better or for worse, is you're going to end up having children doing conventional homework or trying to focus on conventional homework. And just the whole way that our brains are wired around instant gratification and the amount of 10-year-olds are going to have smartphones these days, there's just going to be a big disconnect between how children learn in the private sector, sorry, in the public sector or in school, and how they're actually interpreting information in the rest of their day-to-day lives. And I think that that's eventually where Duolingo will start to creep in.
yeah, where are you at with building out a position in this one, Henry? Then are you still actively buying at the moment? Did you buy after the drop?
So as I said, I was on and off as a shareholder from about $90 in early 23,
Oh
and
well,
bought I bought in September of again for the third time. So I didn't have a position in 2025. I bought in September of 2025 at roughly 280 as a small position, and after these earnings plus increasing conviction in the stock, I decided to actually triple that position.
oh wow,
Yeah.
wow, that's some conviction, is
So
that?
it's gone from being a sort of smaller position to now one of my core holdings. So very exciting stuff. As I said, everything I'm talking about is way down the line. I'm just trying to imagine who's going to be there in transforming the educational industry. And I think Duolingo have a good shot.
Yeah, yeah. I really need to do some research on it whenever I get some time because it does certainly look an interesting one. It seems like we were just saying there, Monday.com, Duolingo, both stocks that just seem to be not liked at the moment because as soon as you mention AI and disruption, they seem to just think it's going to be a dead business, and sometimes it's can create great opportunities.
Hmm. Yeah, I think in both cases, the AI risk is overstated, particularly with Duolingo, because they, as much as language data or maths data is public, the data, as I said, of how people learn and their responses on the app, that's unique to Duolingo. So you have unique data you can train on the AI and make your app incredibly powerful. With Monday, they haven't got that same data advantage, but as we said, very sticky, very AI first still, and fantastic growth in their enterprise customers, which are sticky and have big network effects.